When my fugitive son-in-law came to meet me, I realized the only necklace left from my late wife had disappeared. When I called, my daughter said, "Better he steals from family than strangers." But when he opened the pendant, he called me in panic. "Why did you do this to me?" Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. My name is Daniel, and at 62 years old, I thought I had seen enough of life's surprises. I was wrong. 3 years after losing my wife, Margaret, to cancer, I was still learning to navigate this empty house alone, still finding pieces of her in every corner, still talking to her picture on the mantelpiece like she might actually answer back. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was having my coffee and reading yesterday's newspaper for the third time. Barbara's voice had that familiar edge to it, the one she'd developed sometime in her 20s when she realized she could get what she wanted by wearing me down. "Dad, I need you to meet Donald," she said without preamble. "No hello, no, how are you feeling today? Just straight to business." I set down my coffee cup, already feeling that familiar knot in my stomach. "Donald? My boyfriend. He's been having some trouble lately, and I thought maybe you could help him out. You know, give him some guidance." The way she said trouble made my skin crawl. In my 62 years, I'd learned that when Barbara used that particular tone, trouble usually meant something I didn't want to hear about. "What kind of trouble, sweetheart?" There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, calculating. He had some issues with the law, nothing serious, just some misunderstandings about property that didn't belong to him. My heart sank. Property that didn't belong to him. Even Barbara couldn't bring herself to say the word stealing out loud. "Barbara, honey, I don't think—" "Dad, please. He's really trying to turn his life around. He just needs someone to believe in him. Someone like you." The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment I almost fell for it. Almost. But then I thought about Margaret, about what she would say if she were here. She always could see right through Barbara's games. "When do you want to bring him by?" "Actually, he's in the car. We're outside." Of course they were. Barbara never was one to take no for an answer, and she'd learned long ago that it was harder for me to refuse her when she was standing right in front of me. I opened the front door to see Barbara climbing out of a beat-up sedan that had seen better days. The man who emerged from the passenger side made my stomach turn. Donald was tall and thin, with the kind of restless energy that comes from too many years of looking over your shoulder. His clothes were clean but cheap, and his handshake was too firm, too practiced. Everything about him screamed that he was trying too hard to make a good impression. "Mr. Patterson, it's such an honor to meet you," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "Barbara's told me so much about you." I bet she had. I wondered what version of me she'd painted for him. The lonely widower with a soft heart and deep pockets, probably. They stayed for 2 hours. Donald was charming, I'll give him that. He asked about my work at the construction company, complimented Margaret's garden that I'd been struggling to maintain, and even offered to help me fix the loose railing on the back porch. Barbara beamed at him like he'd just offered to cure cancer, but I couldn't shake the feeling that his eyes were cataloging everything in my house. The way he lingered near Margaret's jewelry box on the dresser when Barbara gave him a tour. The way he asked casual questions about whether I lived alone, whether I had an alarm system, whether the neighbors were close by. When they finally left, I felt drained in a way that had nothing to do with my age. I sat in my recliner trying to shake the feeling that something was wrong when my eyes fell on the small table next to Margaret's side of the bed. The jewelry box was still there, still in its usual spot, but something was missing. Margaret's necklace. The simple gold chain with the heart-shaped locket that she'd worn every day for the last 10 years of her life. The one piece of jewelry she'd specifically asked to be buried with, except I couldn't bear to let it go into the ground with her. It was the only thing I had left that still smelled like her perfume, the only thing that still felt warm when I held it. It was gone. I searched everywhere, under the bed, in the bathroom, in the kitchen where she used to take it off while doing dishes. Nothing. My hands were shaking as I went through every drawer, every surface, every possible place it could have fallen. But I knew, deep in my gut, I knew exactly what had happened. I picked up the phone with trembling fingers and dialed Barbara's number. She answered on the fourth ring, and I could hear Donald's voice in the background. "Dad, what's wrong? You sound upset." "Barbara, Margaret's necklace is missing. The locket. It was on the bedside table this morning, and now it's gone." Silence. Then a sigh that told me everything I needed to know. "Dad, are you sure? Maybe you moved it and forgot. You've been pretty forgetful lately." "I'm not forgetful, Barbara. Someone took it." Another pause. I could hear her whispering to Donald, though I couldn't make out the words. "Dad, that's a pretty serious accusation. Are you really going to blame Donald for something you probably just misplaced?" The casual way she dismissed my concern, the way she automatically defended him without even asking questions, felt like a slap across the face. "I'm not misplacing anything. That necklace was the last piece of your mother I had left, and now it's gone. What am I supposed to think?" When Barbara spoke again, her voice was cold, harder than I'd ever heard it. "You know what, Dad? Even if Donald did take it, maybe that's not such a bad thing. It's better he takes from family than from strangers, right? At least this way, it stays in the family." The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, staring at it like it might explain what had just happened. My daughter, my only child, had just told me it was acceptable for her boyfriend to steal from me because we were related. I set the phone down and walked to the bedroom, to the empty spot where Margaret's necklace should have been. For the first time since her funeral, I cried, not just for the necklace, but for the daughter I thought I'd raised and for the man I was about to become, because something told me this was just the beginning. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Margaret's empty jewelry box sitting on the nightstand like an accusation. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Donald's hands moving through my house, his eyes calculating the value of everything he touched. I saw Barbara's face when she defended him, cold and distant, like she was talking to a stranger instead of her father. By 6 a.m, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to let this slide. I found Donald's phone number in Barbara's old address book, the one she'd left behind when she moved out at 18 and never looked back. My hands weren't steady as I dialed, but my resolve was firm. He answered on the second ring, and his voice was different now. Gone was the polished charm from yesterday. This morning, he sounded tired and wary. "Yeah? Donald, this is Daniel Patterson, Barbara's father." A pause. "Oh, hey, Mr. Patterson, what's up?" "I think you know what's up. I want my wife's necklace back." The silence stretched so long, I thought he might have hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about, sir." "The gold locket, heart-shaped. It was on my bedside table yesterday before you arrived, and it was gone after you left. I want it back." "Look, Mr. Patterson, I understand you're upset, but I didn't take anything from your house. Maybe you should check with Barbara. Maybe she took it for safekeeping or something." The suggestion that Barbara might have taken it without telling me stung, but not because it was impossible, because it was entirely possible. "I'm going to ask you one more time, Donald. Where is my wife's necklace?" His voice hardened. "And I'm telling you one more time, old man, I don't have your damn necklace. Maybe you should worry more about your memory and less about accusing people of things they didn't do." He hung up. I sat there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then I called Barbara. "Dad, it's 7 a.m. What could possibly be so important?" "Did you take your mother's necklace?" "What? No, of course not. Why would I take Mom's necklace?" "Because your boyfriend claims he didn't take it, and I know it didn't just walk away by itself." I heard her sigh, that exaggerated sound she'd been making since she was 14, whenever she thought I was being unreasonable. "Dad, you're obsessing over this. It's just a piece of jewelry." "Why just a piece of jewelry?" The words hit me like a physical blow. That necklace represented 43 years of marriage, thousands of days when Margaret had fastened it around her neck while I watched her get ready for work, for church, for the hundreds of ordinary moments that make up a life together. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry to me, Barbara. It was the last thing I had of her. Well, maybe it's time you stopped living in the past and started moving on. Mom's been gone for 3 years, Dad. You can't keep a shrine to her forever. The cruelty in her voice took my breath away. When had my daughter become so cold? When had she stopped caring about anything that mattered to me? I'm not keeping a shrine. I'm trying to hold on to the memory of the woman who raised you, who loved you unconditionally, who... Who what, Dad? Who babied me? Who never let me make my own decisions? Who made me feel guilty for every choice I made that didn't fit her perfect little vision of what I should be? I had never heard Barbara talk about her mother this way. Margaret had adored Barbara, had sacrificed everything for her, had worked double shifts at the diner to pay for Barbara's college education that she never finished. Your mother loved you, Barbara. My mother controlled me, and now you're trying to do the same thing. You're trying to control Donald, trying to make him into some kind of criminal just because you don't like him. I don't like him because he's a thief, Barbara, because he came into my home and stole the most precious thing I owned. You don't know that. You're just assuming. I'm not assuming anything. I know what I know. There was a long pause. When Barbara spoke again, her voice was quiet, almost dangerous. Dad, I'm going to say this once, and I want you to listen carefully. Donald is important to me. More important than some old necklace. More important than your feelings about some old necklace. If you keep pushing this, if you keep trying to cause problems between us, you're going to lose me. And trust me, you don't want that. The threat was clear. Choose the necklace or choose her. Choose my grief or choose my daughter. Barbara, please, just ask him. Just ask him to give it back, and we can forget this whole thing ever happened. No, Dad, I'm not going to interrogate my boyfriend because you've convinced yourself he's a thief. You either drop this right now, or you deal with the consequences. He hung up. I spent the rest of the morning pacing through the house, trying to make sense of what was happening. This wasn't the Barbara I'd raised. The Barbara I knew might have been headstrong, might have made questionable choices, but she would never have defended someone who stole from her own father. She would never have threatened to cut me out of her life over a piece of jewelry, no matter how much it meant to me. Unless she already knew Donald had taken it. The thought hit me like a punch to the gut. What if Barbara hadn't just defended Donald after the fact? What if she'd known about the theft from the beginning? What if she'd even suggested it? I thought about how she'd insisted on bringing him over, how she'd given him a tour of the house, how she'd made sure to point out Margaret's jewelry box. I thought about how quickly she'd called after he'd left, almost like she'd been waiting for me to notice the necklace was missing. I thought about her words on the phone yesterday. It's better he takes from family than from strangers. The words made perfect sense if you looked at them from a different angle, not as a justification after the fact, but as a plan from the beginning. I picked up the phone and called my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She'd lived next door for 15 years and had always been friendly with Margaret. More importantly, she had a security camera pointed at her driveway that captured a good portion of my front yard. Daniel, how are you holding up, dear? I'm fine, Mrs. Chen. I was wondering if I could ask you a favor. Could I take a look at your security footage from yesterday afternoon? I think someone might have taken something from my house. Of course, dear. Come right over. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Mrs. Chen's living room, watching her security monitor. The footage was grainy but clear enough. I watched myself open the front door, watched Barbara and Donald get out of their car, watched them go inside. Then, 2 hours later, I watched them leave. And I watched Donald slip something small into his jacket pocket just before getting into the car. Mrs. Chen squeezed my shoulder. I'm sorry, Daniel. Do you want me to call the police? I stared at the screen, at the evidence of my daughter's boyfriend stealing from me while she watched. But calling the police would mean admitting that my own daughter had betrayed me. It would mean accepting that the family I thought I had was gone. No, I said quietly. Not yet. Let me try to handle this myself first. But even as I said it, I knew that Donald taking the necklace was just the beginning. Something told me that when I finally got to the bottom of this, I was going to discover things about my family that I wasn't prepared to know. The phone rang as I walked back into my house. Donald's number on the caller ID. My hand trembled as I answered, though I wasn't sure if it was from anger or fear. Donald's voice came through the phone like a man drowning. Gone was any pretense of innocence or charm. He was crying, actually sobbing, in a way that made my stomach clench with dread. Why did you do this to me? He choked out between gasps. Why didn't you tell me? I gripped the phone tighter, my mind racing. Tell you what? Donald, what are you talking about? The locket, he said, his voice breaking. I opened the locket. My blood turned to ice. Margaret's locket had never opened, not in all the years I'd known her. The clasp had been broken for decades, sealed shut with age and wear. I'd always assumed it was empty anyway, just a simple piece of jewelry she'd worn out of habit. "What do you mean you opened it?" "I took it to a pawn shop," he admitted, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I needed the money, okay? I have debts, and Barbara said you had plenty of money and it was just sitting there, and I thought, you thought you'd steal from me and sell my dead wife's jewelry." The words came out flat, emotionless, because I was too stunned to feel anything yet. "Yeah, okay, fine, I took it. But the guy at the pawn shop, he said the clasp was just stuck, not broken. He got it open, and inside..." His voice dissolved into fresh sobs. "Inside what, Donald?" "There's a picture, a little tiny picture. It's Barbara, but she's maybe 4 or 5 years old. And there's a man with her. A man who isn't you." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "That's not possible." "There's more," Donald continued, his voice shaking. "There is a piece of paper folded up really small. It's a birth certificate, but it's not the one you probably have. This one has a different father's name on it, someone named Marcus Rivera." Marcus Rivera. The name exploded in my mind like a bomb, bringing with it a flood of memories I'd spent 30 years trying to forget. Margaret's co-worker at the diner. The man she'd sworn meant nothing to her. The man she'd promised me she'd never see again after that terrible fight we'd had when Barbara was 4. "Mr. Patterson, are you there?" I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up completely, like someone was strangling me from the inside. "There's something else," Donald whispered. "There's a note. It's in your wife's handwriting. It says, 'Daniel can never know. Barbara must never know. Some truths are too dangerous for love.'" The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the kitchen table. I stared at it like it was a snake that might bite me if I picked it up again. Some truths are too dangerous for love. I thought about Barbara's dark hair and olive skin, so different from my fair coloring and Margaret's strawberry blonde. I'd always assumed she'd gotten it from some distant relative, some genetic quirk that skipped generations. I thought about how she'd never quite looked like either of us, how strangers had sometimes asked if she was adopted. I thought about that terrible year when Barbara was 4, when Margaret had been distant and cold, when she'd started working extra shifts at the diner and coming home smelling like cigarettes and another man's cologne. The fights we'd had, the accusations I'd made, the way she'd cried and sworn it meant nothing, that it was over, that she'd never see him again. I'd believed her because I'd loved her, because the alternative had been too devastating to consider. But she'd been pregnant then. I remembered now, with a clarity that made me sick. She'd been pregnant and lost the baby at 5 months. We'd grieved together, held each other through the pain, never speaking about the timing or the questions that had haunted me in the dark hours of the night. Except she hadn't lost a baby. She'd given birth to one, to Barbara. My hands were shaking as I picked up the phone. Donald was still there, his breathing ragged and uneven. "Donald, I need you to bring me that locket. Right now." "I can't. I'm scared. Barbara's going to kill me when she finds out I took it. She's going to know I went through your stuff, and she'll..." "Barbara already knows you took it." The words came out harder than I'd intended. "She knew before you even walked into my house. This was planned." Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, "What do you mean?" "I mean my daughter sent you to steal from me, Donald. She knew exactly what you were taking and why." No, that's not..." "Barbara wouldn't do that. She loves you." I almost laughed, but it would have come out as a scream. "Barbara doesn't love anyone but herself. And now I'm starting to understand why. Mr. Patterson, I don't understand what's happening here. Neither do I, son, but I'm going to figure it out." "Where are you right now?" "I'm at my apartment. Barbara went to work. She doesn't know I opened the locket." "Good. Don't tell her. Not yet. I need some time to think." "What are you going to do?" I looked around my kitchen, at the pictures of Margaret and Barbara that covered every surface, at the life I'd built on what I now realized might have been a foundation of lies. I don't know yet. "But Donald, you're going to bring me that locket, and you're going to bring me everything that was inside it. And then we're going to have a very long conversation about what happens next." "Okay, yeah, okay. But Mr. Patterson, I'm sorry. I really am sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." The line went dead, and I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of a life that might not have been real. I thought about all the times Margaret had deflected questions about Barbara's appearance, all the times she'd changed the subject when people commented on how different Barbara looked from both of us. I thought about Barbara herself, about the way she'd always been distant from me, always pushing boundaries, always seeming to resent my presence in her life. I had blamed it on typical teenage rebellion, then on the stress of college, then on the difficulties of early adulthood. But what if it had been something else entirely? What if, somehow, she'd always known the truth? What if Margaret had told her years ago, and they'd both been lying to me ever since? The thought made me physically sick. I ran to the bathroom and retched into the toilet, bringing up nothing but bile and the bitter taste of betrayal. When I finally stopped shaking, I walked back to the kitchen and looked at the phone. I could call Barbara right now, confront her with what I'd learned, demand answers. But something told me that would be a mistake. Something told me there were more secrets here, more lies that needed to be uncovered before I could understand the full scope of what had been done to me. I thought about Margaret's note. Some truths are too dangerous for love. What if the truth about Barbara's paternity wasn't the only secret Margaret had been keeping? What if this was just the beginning? An hour later, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Donald standing on my front porch, his face pale and drawn, a small jewelry box clutched in his trembling hands. I opened the door and looked into the eyes of the man who had just destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. "Come in," I said quietly. "We need to talk." Donald sat across from me at my kitchen table, the opened locket between us like a piece of evidence in a murder trial. Inside the tiny gold heart, a miniature photograph showed a 4-year-old Barbara sitting on the lap of a dark-haired man I recognized despite the 30 years that had passed. Marcus Rivera looked exactly as I remembered him. Handsome in a rough way, with the kind of easy smile that had probably broken more hearts than Margaret's. The birth certificate was worse than the photograph. Official, undeniable, with Marcus Rivera listed as the father and Margaret's maiden name signed at the bottom. The date matched perfectly with when Margaret had told me she'd lost our baby. "I didn't know," Donald said for the 5th time since he'd arrived. His hands were shaking as he reached for the coffee I'd poured him. "I swear to God, Mr. Patterson, I had no idea what was in there." I picked up Margaret's note, written in her careful cursive on a scrap of paper no bigger than a postage stamp. "Some truths are too dangerous for love." Below that, in smaller writing, "If anything happens to me, Daniel deserves to know that I never stopped loving him, even when I couldn't stop loving Marcus too. Even when I couldn't stop loving Marcus too." The words were like acid in my chest. Margaret hadn't just had an affair. She'd been in love with 2 men at the same time, and she'd chosen to lie to both of us rather than choose between us. "Tell me about the pawn shop," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Donald shifted uncomfortably. "It's on 5th Street, Tony's Cash and Carry. The guy there, Tony, he's the one who opened it. He said it was a shame to pawn something with sentimental value, especially when it had stuff inside. That's when I saw the picture, and..." He trailed off, staring at his hands. "And you decided to blackmail me?" No, that's not what happened. I was going to bring it back, I swear. But then I saw the birth certificate, and I didn't know what to do. I called Barbara, and she told me to come home and not tell you anything until she could figure out what to do." My stomach clenched. "You called Barbara? You told her what you found?" "Yeah, I thought she should know. I mean, it's her birth certificate, right? Her real one." "Oh, what did she say?" Donald's face went pale. "She got really quiet for a long time. Then she asked me if I was sure it was real, if there was any chance it was fake. When I told her about the note, about what your wife wrote, she started laughing." "Laughing?" Not like it was funny, like she was relieved maybe, like she'd been waiting for this to happen. I closed my eyes, trying to process what that meant. Had Barbara suspected all along? Had Margaret told her the truth before she died? Or had Barbara somehow always known she didn't belong to me? I thought back to Barbara's childhood, searching for signs I might have missed. She'd always been different, that much was true. More temperamental than other children, quicker to anger, harder to please. Margaret had always made excuses for her behavior, always insisted that Barbara was just spirited or independent. But there had been moments, especially as Barbara got older, when I'd catch her looking at me with something that seemed almost like contempt. Times when she'd make cutting remarks about how different she was from me, how she didn't understand how we could be related. I'd chalked it up to typical teenage rebellion. But what if it had been something else? What if Barbara had inherited more than just Marcus Rivera's dark hair and olive skin? What if she'd inherited his character too? I'd only met Marcus a handful of times, but I remembered him as charming and selfish, the kind of man who took what he wanted without worrying about the consequences, the kind of man who would sleep with a married woman and then disappear when things got complicated. Donald, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. He nodded, his eyes wide and frightened. How long have you and Barbara been together? About 8 months. And in that time, has she ever mentioned her father? Has she ever said anything about our relationship, about how she feels about me? Donald shifted uncomfortably, his gaze dropping to the table. She doesn't really like talking about family stuff. That's not what I asked. He was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. She said you were controlling, that you'd never really understood her, never really accepted her for who she was. She said you always made her feel like she wasn't good enough, like she had to be perfect to earn your love. The words hit me like physical blows. Is that really how Barbara saw our relationship? Had I been so focused on trying to be a good father that I'd somehow made her feel unloved? What else did she say? She said that you and her mother had this perfect little life planned out for her, and when she didn't fit into it, you both just gave up on her. She said that's why she moved out so young, why she never comes around much. I thought about Barbara's early 20s, when she dropped out of college and moved in with a series of boyfriends, each one worse than the last. Margaret and I had tried to help, had offered money and support and a place to stay, but Barbara had always refused. She'd said she needed to make her own way, but now I wondered if there had been something else driving her away. Did she ever mention Marcus Rivera? Donald's head snapped up. Who? The man in the picture, her biological father. No, never. I've never heard that name before. He paused, frowning. But there was this one time, maybe 3 months ago, when we were looking through some old photos she had. There was this picture of her as a little kid with some guy, and when I asked who he was, she got really weird about it. Said it was nobody important, just some family friend. What did the man in the photo look like? Dark hair, kind of handsome in a rough way. He was holding Barbara, and she was maybe 4 or 5. They were both smiling, and they looked, he struggled for the words, they looked like they belonged together, you know, like they were related. I picked up the tiny photograph from the locket, studying Marcus Rivera's face. He was younger in this picture than in my memories, probably in his early 30s. Barbara was nestled against his chest, like she felt completely safe with him, completely loved. I'd never seen her look that relaxed and happy in any picture with me. Donald, I need you to think carefully. Has Barbara ever done anything like this before? Set up a theft, I mean? Has she ever suggested that you take something from someone else's house? His face flushed red. Look, Mr. Patterson, I know how this looks, but just answer the question. There was this one time, maybe 6 months ago. We needed money for rent, and Barbara suggested I visit her Aunt Carol. She said Carol was loaded, lived alone, and probably wouldn't even notice if a few things went missing. Did you do it? No. I thought about it, but something felt wrong about the whole thing. Barbara got really mad when I said no. She called me a coward, said I wasn't willing to do what it took to take care of her. I felt a chill run down my spine. What happened with the rent? Barbara figured something out. She said she got a loan from a friend, but she never told me who. Ha ha ha. I wondered if Marcus Rivera was still alive, still in touch with Margaret before she died. Had he been giving Barbara money all these years? Had Margaret been facilitating a relationship between them behind my back? The thought made me sick, but it would explain so much. Barbara's resentment toward me, her constant financial problems despite never seeming to want for anything, the way she'd always seemed to have secrets she wouldn't share. Donald, I want you to do something for me. Okay. I want you to go home and act like nothing happened. Don't tell Barbara about our conversation. Don't tell her I know what was in the locket. Can you do that? I guess so. But why? I looked at the evidence spread across my kitchen table, at the proof that my entire life had been built on lies. Because I need to understand how deep this goes before I decide what to do about it. And I have a feeling that if Barbara knows I know the truth, she's going to do something drastic to protect herself. Donald nodded slowly. Mr. Patterson, what are you going to do? I gathered up the birth certificate, the photograph, and Margaret's note, folding them carefully and placing them in my shirt pocket, right over my heart, where they seemed to burn against my skin. I'm going to find Marcus Rivera, I said quietly, and I'm going to ask him some questions that should have been asked 30 years ago. Finding Marcus Rivera took 3 days and cost me $200 in online searches and phone calls to old contacts from the diner where Margaret had worked. He was living in Phoenix now, retired from construction work, divorced twice with no other children. When I finally called him, his voice was older but still carried that same easy confidence I remembered. Daniel Patterson, he said after I introduced myself. Jesus, that's a name I never expected to hear again. How's Margaret? Margaret died 3 years ago. Cancer. There was a long silence. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, sadder. I'm sorry, Daniel. I really am. She was a good woman. She was a complicated woman, I corrected. And I think you know why I'm calling. Another silence, longer this time. Yeah, he said finally. I think I do. We talked for 2 hours. Marcus told me things that shattered what little remained of my illusions about my marriage. He and Margaret had been in love, really in love, not just having an affair. They'd planned to leave their respective spouses and start over together. But when Margaret got pregnant with Barbara, everything changed. She couldn't do it, Marcus explained, his voice heavy with old pain. She couldn't break up your marriage, couldn't take your chance at being a father away from you. She said you were a good man who deserved better than what she was giving you. So she lied to both of us. She made a choice. She chose you and the life you could give Barbara. I was just a cook at a diner, Daniel. You had a steady job, a house, a future. Margaret wanted what was best for her daughter. Her daughter, not mine. Biologically, no, but you raised her. You were her father in every way that mattered. I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Marcus had tried to stay in touch over the years, had sent money when he could, but Margaret had eventually cut off contact completely. He hadn't seen Barbara since she was 7 years old. She sent me pictures sometimes, he said before we ended the call. Christmas cards with updates. But Margaret made it clear that Barbara was better off thinking you were her father. And maybe she was right. Maybe she is right. So Lure. But when I got home from that phone call, I found Donald sitting on my front porch, his face pale and his hands shaking. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. We need to talk, he said as soon as he saw me. Barbara knows. She knows I told you about the locket. My blood turned cold. How? I don't know. I did exactly what you said. I didn't tell her anything. But when I got home yesterday, she was going through my stuff. She found the receipt from Tony's pawn shop and started asking questions. I tried to lie, but she kept pushing, and finally I broke down and told her everything. What did she say? Donald's voice was barely a whisper. She said you probably already knew. She said you've known all along that she wasn't really your daughter, and that's why you never really loved her. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. That's not true. I know that. I can see how much you care about her. But Barbara, she's angry, Mr. Patterson. Really angry. And she's scared. Scared of what? Scared you're going to cut her off. Scared you're going to tell everyone the truth and embarrass her. Scared you're going to make her pay back all the money you've given her over the years. Money. Of course it came back to money. It always did with Barbara. How much money are we talking about, Donald? He shifted uncomfortably. I'm not sure exactly. But Barbara said you've been supporting her since she moved out. Rent money, car payments, credit card bills. She said it's probably been at least $15,000 over the past few years. $15,000. I thought about all the times Barbara had called with emergencies, all the checks I'd written without question, because she was my daughter and I loved her. Money I'd been happy to give because I thought she needed help getting on her feet. Donald, what does Barbara want from me? She wants to make a deal? Of course she did. What kind of deal? She wants you to give her $50,000. In exchange, she'll disappear from your life forever. No more phone calls, no more visits, no more asking for money. She'll move to another state and you'll never have to see her again. I stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. She's blackmailing me. She says she's giving you what you've always wanted. A way out. A way to stop pretending you love a daughter who isn't really yours. And if I refuse? Donald's face went even paler. She says she'll tell everyone the truth, not just about her real father, but about how you've known all along and pretended not to. She'll make it look like you've been lying to the whole family for decades, using her for some sick psychological game. Who would believe that? She has proof now, the locket, the birth certificate, your wife's note. She can spin it however she wants. She can make you look like the villain in all this. I sat down on my front steps, suddenly feeling every one of my 62 years. This was my daughter, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose tears I'd dried through countless childhood disappointments. And she was threatening to destroy my reputation, my memory of Margaret, everything I had left, unless I paid her to disappear. There's something else, Donald said quietly. What now? She wants me to help her. She says if I don't go along with this, she'll tell the police I broke into your house and stole the necklace. She has texts from me admitting I took it, and she'll say she tried to talk me out of it, but I wouldn't listen. So Barbara was planning to destroy both of us if she didn't get what she wanted. She would sacrifice the man she claimed to love just as easily as she would sacrifice the man who had raised her. What are you going to do? Donald asked. I looked at my house, at the home Margaret and I had built together, at the life we'd created based on love and sacrifice and compromise. I thought about all the years I'd spent wondering why Barbara seemed so distant, why she never seemed to appreciate anything I did for her, why she always seemed to be looking for something I couldn't give her. Now I knew. She'd been looking for Marcus Rivera, for the father she'd somehow always known I wasn't. And instead of being grateful for the love I'd given her anyway, she was using my love against me as a weapon. Tell Barbara I want to meet with her, I said finally. You're going to pay her? I stood up, my decision crystallizing with a clarity that surprised me. No, Donald. I'm going to give her something much more valuable than money. I'm going to give her the truth. What do you mean? I mean, it's time Barbara learned what kind of man her real father was, and what kind of woman her mother was, and what kind of choice she's making right now. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Margaret's note. Some truths are too dangerous for love. She'd been wrong about that. The truth wasn't dangerous to love. Lies were dangerous to love. Secrets were dangerous to love. The truth, no matter how painful, was the only thing that could set us free. I thought about all the times over the years when I'd sensed something was wrong but hadn't pushed for answers. All the times I'd chosen to believe what was convenient rather than dig deeper. I'd been as guilty as Margaret of living a lie, of choosing comfort over truth. But I was done with lies now. Barbara wanted to play hardball. Fine, I would give her a game she would never forget. The next morning I called her and arranged to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown where we could talk without interruption. When I hung up the phone, I felt lighter than I had in years. Win or lose, this charade was finally going to end. Barbara arrived exactly on time, dressed carefully in a way that was meant to remind me of Margaret. She'd always been good at manipulation, but I was finally starting to see the strings. Barbara sat across from me in the coffee shop, her hands wrapped around a latte she hadn't touched. She looked nervous but determined, like someone about to close a business deal she wasn't entirely comfortable with. I studied her face, seeing Marcus Rivera's features so clearly now that I wondered how I'd ever missed them. "Dad," she started, but I held up my hand. "Before you say anything, I want you to know that I've spoken with Marcus Rivera." The color drained from her face. "What?" "Your biological father. We had a very long conversation about your mother, about their relationship, and about you." Barbara's composure cracked slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. You've known for years that I wasn't your real father. The question is, How long have you known?" She stared at me for a long moment, then her expression hardened. "Does it matter? You still lied to me my entire life." "I never lied to you, Barbara. I didn't know the truth until Donald opened that locket. But you did know, didn't you? When did you find out?" Her jaw tightened. "Mom told me when I was 16. She said you could never handle the truth, that it would destroy you. She made me promise never to tell you." 16. Barbara had known for half her life that I wasn't her biological father, and she'd never said a word. All those years of distance, of resentment, of making me feel like I was failing as a father, it had all been an act. "So, you've been pretending for 14 years. "I've been protecting you for 14 years, she snapped. "Do you have any idea how hard it was to keep that secret? Do you know what it felt like to watch you try so hard to connect with me when I knew it was all based on a lie?" "It wasn't based on a lie, Barbara. It was based on love. I may not be your biological father, but I raised you. I loved you unconditionally. I was there for every scraped knee, every broken heart, every moment when you needed a parent. You were there because you felt obligated, because Mom made you feel like you had to be." "No," I said firmly. "I was there because I chose to be, because you were my daughter in every way that mattered." Barbara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Right. That's why you always looked at me like something was missing. That's why you could never understand me, never really accept me for who I was. I looked at you like I was trying to figure out how to help you. You were angry and distant from the time you were a teenager, and I couldn't understand why. Now I know it's because you were carrying around this secret, this resentment. I wasn't resentful. I was realistic. I knew you weren't really my father, so I didn't expect you to act like one." The words stung, but I pressed on. "Is that why you moved out so young? Why you always kept me at arm's length? Why you only called when you needed money?" "I called when I needed help. That's what fathers do. They help their children. But I wasn't your father, according to you. So what was I, Barbara? An ATM? A convenient source of financial support from a man who was stupid enough to love a child who wasn't his?" Her mask slipped completely then, and I saw the cold calculation underneath. "You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, you were convenient. You felt guilty about not being able to connect with me, so you threw money at the problem, and I let you. Because why shouldn't I? You owed me that much for all the years of pretending we were a real family." The cruelty of it took my breath away. Not just the words, but the casual way she said them, like she was discussing the weather. "And Marcus? Have you been in contact with him all these years?" "Mom cut off contact when I was 7. She said it was too dangerous, that you might find out. But after she died, I tracked him down. We've been talking for the past 2 years. Does he know about this? About what you're trying to do to me?" For the first time, Barbara looked uncertain. "He knows about the money situation. He knows you and I don't have a real relationship. But he doesn't know you're blackmailing me, does he?" Silence. "Because Marcus Rivera may have been a lot of things, but he's not a criminal. He's not someone who would steal from the man who raised his daughter. He's actually grateful to me, Barbara. Grateful that I gave you opportunities he never could have provided." "That's not true." "I called him yesterday. After our conversation through Donald, I told him what you were planning to do. Would you like to know what he said?" Barbara's face had gone completely white. "He said he was ashamed that his daughter could be so heartless, so cruel to the man who had loved her and sacrificed for her. He said if you went through with this, he never wanted to see you again." The coffee cup slipped from Barbara's hands, sending latte splashing across the table. "You had no right to call him." "I had every right. He's your father, isn't he? I thought he should know what kind of person his daughter had become." Barbara was shaking now, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. "You bastard. You vindictive, manipulative bastard." "I'm vindictive? Barbara? You were planning to destroy my reputation, frame your boyfriend for robbery, and extort $50,000 from me. And I'm the manipulative one? You've ruined everything. Marcus was the only family I had left, and you poisoned him against me. I told him the truth, just like I'm telling you the truth now. You want to know why we never had a real relationship? It wasn't because you weren't my biological daughter. It was because you're a fundamentally selfish person who sees other people as tools to be used." Barbara stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm done with this. I'm done with you. Give me the $50,000 or I swear to God I'll make your life hell." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. "This contains copies of every check I've written you over the past 5 years. Every rent payment, every car payment, every emergency loan. It totals $37,416. Barbara stared at the envelope like it might bite her. "Here's my counteroffer," I continued. "I'll forgive every penny of that debt. I'll never ask you to pay back a single dollar. In exchange, you walk away from my life and never contact me again. That's not enough. It's more than enough. It's more than you deserve. I want the $50,000. I leaned back in my chair, feeling calmer than I had in weeks. "Then take me to court. Sue me. Tell the world your story about how the man who raised you and supported you for 30 years somehow owes you money because you're not biologically related to him. See how that plays with a judge." Barbara's face twisted with rage. "I'll tell everyone what kind of man you really are. I'll tell them how you knew the truth all along and used it to control me." "Go ahead. I've already called every member of our family, every friend we have in common. I've told them the real story. About your mother's affair, about the secret she kept, about the locket and what was inside it. Most importantly, I've told them about your blackmail attempt." The blood drained from Barbara's face. "You didn't. I did. And do you know what every single person said? They said they were sorry for me. Sorry that I'd spent 30 years loving a daughter who could turn out to be so heartless. Sorry that your mother's secret had caused so much pain. And sorry that you were willing to destroy the man who raised you for $50,000. Barbara sank back into her chair, the fight going out of her. For a moment she looked like the lost little girl in the photograph with Marcus Rivera. But then her expression hardened again. "Fine, keep your money, but don't expect me to pretend we're family anymore. Don't expect me to call on holidays or visit when you're sick or come to your funeral when you die alone." I smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it was a genuine smile. "Barbara, that's not a threat. That's a gift. The greatest gift you could possibly give me." She stared at me, confused and angry. "For 30 years, I've been trying to earn the love of someone who is incapable of giving it. I've been carrying guilt about failing as a father, when the truth is, I was never given a real chance to succeed. You've been playing a role, pretending to be my daughter while resenting every moment of it." I stood up, leaving the envelope on the table between us. "I'm 62 years old, Barbara. I don't have time left to waste on people who don't want to be in my life. I'd rather spend my remaining years with friends who actually care about me than family members who see me as nothing more than a source of money." I turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Donald is a good man who made some bad choices because he loves you. If you frame him for theft or destroy his life because this didn't go the way you planned, I'll make sure Marcus knows exactly what kind of person you really are. And trust me, he still has enough influence in your life to make you regret it." I walked away without looking back. As I reached my car, I heard Barbara calling my name, but I didn't turn around. Whatever she had to say, I didn't need to hear it. 6 months later, I sold my house and moved to a smaller place across town. I changed my phone number and didn't give it to Barbara. I joined a senior center, made new friends, started volunteering at the local animal shelter. For the first time since Margaret died, I felt genuinely happy. Donald called me once, about 3 months after our coffee shop confrontation. Barbara had moved to Phoenix to try to reconnect with Marcus, but it hadn't gone well. Marcus had listened to her story and told her she needed to grow up and take responsibility for her actions. She'd lasted 2 weeks before moving back, angrier and more bitter than ever. "She asks about you sometimes," Donald told me, "not because she misses you, but because she's angry that you seem to be doing fine without her." I wasn't surprised. Barbara had always been someone who needed to be needed, who derived her sense of self-worth from being the center of other people's problems. The fact that I was thriving without her probably infuriated her more than anything else could have. A year later, I met Sarah at the animal shelter. She was a widow like me with grown children who actually loved her and called her regularly. We started as friends, bonding over our shared love of dogs and our mutual understanding of loss. It developed into something deeper, something honest and uncomplicated by secrets or lies. When I told Sarah about Barbara, about the whole strange story of deception and betrayal, she listened without judgment. Then she said something that stayed with me. "You didn't lose a daughter, Daniel. You gained your freedom." She was right. For the first time in my adult life, I was free to be myself without worrying about someone else's expectations or resentments. Free to love and be loved without conditions or hidden agendas. Free to build new relationships based on honesty instead of trying to repair old ones built on lies. I never heard from Barbara again. Sometimes I wondered what became of her, whether she ever learned to take responsibility for her choices or continued to blame others for her problems. But mostly I didn't think about her at all. Margaret's locket sits in a drawer in my bedroom now, still containing the photograph and the birth certificate and the note. Sometimes I take it out and look at it, not with pain anymore, but with a kind of peaceful understanding. Margaret had made her choices out of love, even if they were the wrong choices. And in the end, those choices had led me to discover something more valuable than family secrets or biological connections. They had led me to discover who I really was when I stopped trying to be someone else's idea of a father, a husband, a man. They had led me to a life where love was freely given and gratefully received, where truth was more important than comfort, where peace was more valuable than obligation. Barbara had been right about one thing. We were never really family. But she'd been wrong about everything else. I hadn't lost anything when she walked out of my life. I had finally found myself,